Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of EDH Takes. It is a beautiful, cloudy day in the EDH Takes complex, and I'm your host, Spencer Cook, with my co-host, Elijah Samuelson, and today we're here to talk about something I'm personally passionate about, Eli. I think you're passionate about it as well. It's the idea of cards in Commander that will just win the game with one card or out of nowhere,
This is a topic that we've been cooking up since the transfer of power away from those tyrants at the Rules Committee.
Yeah.
When Gavin seized control from them. There were several podcasts around that time I was listening to. I think that the Command Zone and Commander Clash podcast both did episodes sort of evaluating the ban list and talking about cards that could be removed from the ban list and maybe added to at the time, what people thought was going to be the bracket system. And that's still a thing that could sort of happen with the new bracket system. But there was a lot of discussion around cards such as Biorhythm, and notably going into the Commander bracket update coming out late April, there's a heavy implication that Coalition Victory will be unbanned. And so people were discussing, are those cards just okay? Because 8 mana should just win you the game.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of content creators or just people in the Magic space, as well as people in personal experience, will say things like that, Eli, like, oh, it's 8 mana, oh, it's 7 mana, oh, it's 9 mana, oh, it's 10 mana. It might as well just win the game. If it doesn't win the game, why would you play it? Like that much mana, it should just win the game, and it's totally fine to win the game. Like that's what Commander's about. That's kind of like a mindset that I've seen, over the course of the last several years.
People are never satisfied. They just can't be pleased with it's 6 mana and it didn't give me this overwhelming game changer advantage.
Yeah.
Not even playable.
If I'm not winning by turn 6 with my 8 mana spell, it's not good enough. I'm playing fast Commander. These games gotta end, we can't sit in the game for the longer. I gotta be killing everyone. That's my strategy.
So with the 8 mana cards, notably the Biorhythm or the Coalition Victory, I always feel like there's the way the argument plays out for the 8 mana sorcery that wins the game with some small little extra step you've got to take. I think the argument plays out, well, 8 mana implies everyone's got a lot of mana, so therefore it must be around 7 or 8 turns into the game, which I think most people agree in the sort of bracket 3 range of Commander is actually a pretty reasonable time for a game to be ending or threatening to end at least. And I think that's when a lot of our games would maybe find their pace. Like by that turn, people are presenting the ability to win maybe.
Yeah, but the problem with that kind of mindset is that even, especially in current year Commander, honestly, even in Commander of olden times, you are able to get to 8 mana, not even a small percentage of the time, a decent percentage of the time in pretty early turns of the game. I'm thinking if your deck is built to get to 8, you can probably get there on turn 4 or 5, depending on your deck. If you're playing cards that let you save up maybe treasure mana or like a Jessica's Will, like a ritual or something, you can get to 8 mana for a spell, like a one-time use 8 mana on turn 4, pretty easily.
I think for me, the sorcery speed win the game, it becomes problematic because it's actually incredibly easy to get to a large amount of mana if that is your only end goal. Thinking of rituals or mana dorks, they are incredibly efficient sources of mana.
Yeah.
But we all tend to agree in most casual Commander games, the deck playing a ton of rituals has no longevity and it's not resilient to anything. Or the mana dorks, somebody can get out with the elf deck to 10 mana probably by turn 6 maybe on average.
Even before that,
depending on the dorks.
Yeah, depending on what you're getting, not even the elves. If I'm thinking of mana dorks that tap for a lot of mana, cards like Bloom Tender or the 3 mana version of it. Or
there's Priest of Titania.
Exactly.
Which is insane.
Some people say you should unban Orphelos. No, thank you. But and not even mana dorks. Even and not even counting Soul Ring hands, you go like 2 mana rock, which you have an abundance of. You can play upwards of 20 of them if you want to, into into like a 4 mana rock that taps for 2 or 3 mana, then all of a sudden you're untapping on turn 4 with what is that, 6, 7 mana, right? 8 mana potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's super easy, right? If you're playing the requisite 10 mana rocks, you go, like you said, turn 2 mana rock, turn 3, play 2 more mana rocks, next turn you've got the amount of
mana on 4,
we're approaching the amount of mana pretty easy. Like, that's not a lot of steps, and that's not really even like
a lot of
a restriction to your deck building in that case. Whereas the ritual argument or the mana dork thing, might be, not that mana dorks are bad necessarily, but it's changing how you maybe make decks. If you could just get away with, I just get to reach this amount of mana and then press the win button.
Yeah. I don't want to spend all this episode talking about like ways to get to 7 or 8 mana, but you can play commanders that will ramp you mana consistently every time. There's quite a few 2 mana commanders that'll tap for a mana. I know people have talked about doing things like you play your 2 mana ramp commander into your 4 mana green spell that gets 2 basic lands or 2 lands into play.
Oh yes, friend of the show, Salubrious Snail.
Yeah,
who Rachel loves so much.
He invented that concept because he talked about it one time. That's what I've learned from looking at Reddit recently.
He stole it from me.
Yeah.
I was the first person to ever do that with, what's her name? Rada.
Yeah. But anyway, like that just requires you to play, I mean, there's more than 10 4 mana, ramp for 2 cards, ramp spells in your deck, and all you need to do is play lands and those, and then you have, on turn 4, 7 mana? Is that right? Yeah, so very, very, like, uber consistent. Like, 70% of games you can do this if you want to.
I would like to set up a straw man here of a commander player that I think exists. This is a sort of several arguments that I've heard, and I'd like to put them... This isn't necessarily this same person saying them, but this is just something that I feel like we hear a lot. And it's this idea of, green always has about 8 mana on around turn 3 or 4, like that kind of joke.
Yeah,
they've got so much mana. And then at the same time saying, a biorhythm wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah.
And also unban Rafellos.
Well,
like, these are all opinions that I think are pretty common. Would you agree?
I think so. Also, on that idea of like I don't want to get in. Maybe I'll wait to talk about biorhythm, but I'll just give you a nugget here. If a green deck decides that it wants to do that, like, and then just like play it like a couple mana dorks or like ramp spells and then play biorhythm as soon as possible, like, and they don't even, like, let's say they don't even care about like necessarily winning the game, like, is that a good experience to just like suicide the game to like essentially a draw, or like just someone wins by happening to like untap after the biorhythm player or something? I don't think that's a very good experience. That's on the level of like chaos cards when used like that. And I don't know, like Sway of the Stars kind of like, not Sway of the Stars.
Speaking of high mana sorceries that not necessarily win the game in this particular. I think an example
that
of
ruin
like
the game.
Thieves Auction.
Yeah.
I think should be banned. That's not okay.
Yeah,
it's a waste of time. That's like a almost like dexterity level of like, it's just like doing something absurd that shouldn't. Yeah, don't have.
Well, but the funny thing with that card, I suppose, is maybe that actually scales with game time for how hard it's going to be to resolve, right? Like, if you play that on turn 4, it might not be that hard to resolve.
Well, I think it kind of is just, in a way, 9 mana or 8 mana win the game card, because I'll just scoop.
Yeah, I'm good.
I don't want to do it. I'm not looking to do the Thieves Auction.
That's fair.
I don't want commander players touching my cards as much as I can. I mean, that's the maximum like touch value you can get out of a card.
Oh,
if you want to touch the most
things
of your opponent's cards, outside of like shuffling or cutting their deck, right? I think so, and that's not going to be good for you.
If I want to if I want to be a bad actor and try to get away with damaging my opponent's cards, but like with a little bit of plausible deniability, that's the best one for it.
Oh no! Look what happened! What a tragic accident. Yeah, the it should win the game thing. It makes me sad because this used to be the format, and this is Magic Boomer talk, but we could play our 6, 7, 8 drops in Commander, and they didn't have to be that good.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems with 8 mana win the game, is it really just, I know people would say like, oh, it's a power level thing. If your deck's doing this, maybe it doesn't belong in a low power level game. But like, it pushes out so many cards that are just like people are just not allowed to have 8 mana anymore, right? Because if you have 8 mana, you could win the game. So I can't just be.
I think it still maybe comes down to just a problem in mindset with the players, because in my view, I think the average Commander player should more have the mindset of, well, yeah, I know that it's not winning me the game, and I'm fine with that, versus I think there's a large portion of Commander players that would say something along the lines like, well, why would I play that if I could just play this other card that literally wins me the game?
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to be in a Commander game where I could feasibly play a card like Sphinx of the Second Sun, or whatever that card's called. Or, like, is Kamal 8 mana, or is that less than that?
There's an 8 mana Kamal.
Yeah. Like, not that, like, it's the best thing to be doing, but I could feasibly get to that point and not just have that mana cost be reserved for, like, I win the game spells.
Yeah, the thing with the acceleration of Commander and the increase of good or like more playable ramp spells and like how strong that has gotten in Commander, I think we hit this point with I think Command Zone used to do their stats episodes, or they would talk about how fast the format has gotten, and they took the lesson of that initially, I think, to mean we have to play fewer expensive cards in our decks. Which is true to some degree, but the idea that like we're not playing any of those anymore, I don't like, because the way I see it is we get to play those cards now that maybe wouldn't have been super smart to play. Like say in like a mono red deck back in the days, or like a mono white deck with worse mana ramp in like 10 years ago.
You could never play like a Chroma or something, right?
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to play your Zatalpa because you're like, well, I'm going to get punished for that, and my ramp's maybe not good enough to support like that many big cost creatures.
Yeah.
But now it feels to me, I can play a handful of, I still maybe shy away from like 7 and 8 drops sometimes. They've got to be really good. But like I'll play a bunch of 6 drops in my deck.
Yeah.
Because I get to, because we've got so many 2 mana rocks. We've got actually like decent, like a couple decent rituals in red and white too.
And
like,
if you're trying to get to 6 mana, I mean, Eli, you and I are big Temple of the False God enjoyers. I mean, go like 2 mana or 2 mana ramp spell or something into like, value card draw or something into like land like Temple of the False God, like turn, and you have like a 6 mana on turn 4. Like that's that's feels like pretty reasonable for current Commander days, honestly, and that's good. I want to be able to play 6 mana cards that are good, but don't just end the game, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want the format to become people trying to do those things, playing their Sunbird's Invocations, and then people hitting them with the, well, why aren't you just trying? Why aren't you just playing? It's 2 more mana to just win the game. So.
Yeah. Why would I? Not that it's a good card really in current year, but like, why shouldn't I be able to play a Frost Titan? Why?
Why would you play any of those things when you could just be ramping a little harder into Omniscience?
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, play a card draw spell instead, and then play Omniscience in a couple turns, yeah. So, I don't know, do you want to start maybe talking about some of the cards that maybe are kind of similar to that, but maybe a little different? Because people talk, like, there are some cards that people talk about that quote unquote win the game in a similar way. Like, people would say it's in a similar way to
we were just listening before this to the Commander Clash podcast and the Command Zone podcast, and somebody on one of those shows was talking about 8 mana cards that win the game, and said something along the lines of, well, there's a lot of cards that do this already. And we immediately thought, like, well, how many actually are there that, like, 8 mana sorcery, you win the game? A couple examples we have an 8 and a 9 drop. We've got the Insurrection, the red card that steals everyone's creatures, untaps them, gives them haste, with a large enough board state that will often win you the game. But in that case, comparing it to like Biorhythm, Insurrection has scaled with the amount of actions your opponents have taken in that game. It implies that they got to play the game of Magic, at least in some way. Maybe they had just played a big creature and didn't get to do anything with it yet.
Yeah.
And then that'll feel bad. but they must have done something for that card to be good.
Yeah, how much magic do your opponents have to play for an insurrection to literally kill all of your opponents, right? Very significant amount, right? Like that's if they're all at like maybe they lost a little bit of life, that's like 100 life you have to damage. 100 damage in like all creatures in play. That's kind of a lot, honestly.
Yeah, so Insurrection, comparing it to other cards like maybe Craterhoof Behemoth or Triumph of the Hordes, we were thinking about the amount of things that you have to do or things that have to have happened in the game for that card to become good. The other card we had was Rise of the Dark Realms.
Yeah.
9 mana, reanimate all the creatures from all graveyards. That also, unless you're playing some weird, like, very efficient mill deck, that also implies that things have happened in that game.
Yeah.
People have been playing creatures have been dying. Maybe there's been a little bit of mill or people discarding stuff.
Yeah, and maybe you have certain ETB effects or something that like can do good things, or like haste enablers or something where you can kill people, but there needs to be a pretty significant amount of stuff to literally win. Like,
there's little world with those cards. It's incredibly unlikely that I could do the ritual or mana dork, play that card turn 5 or 6, and it's going to win me the game. Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, especially for Rise of the Dark Realms, like, if there hasn't been a board wipe or someone's being milled somehow, it's going to get probably nothing, right? And even with like a stacked graveyards, it's most of the time it's not win the game. It's I just played an insane card that got me an insane board state, maybe a crazy advantage.
Give everyone a headache with the enter the battlefield triggers.
Yeah, it's like I will win the game and I've gained a giant advantage, but it's not literally I'm winning the game now unless you're getting like I don't know, like a Gray Merchant and like a bunch of clones or something. But I guess that they can't clone it right away anyway. So unless it's already in play, but whatever. I digress on that. So these two cards, Insurrection, Rise of the Dark Realms, not really similar, like you said. I
think those are two of the cards that would be used as an example of the sorcery that wins the game. So aside from those, we have Omniscience is an enchantment I mentioned earlier. That's 10 mana. Make your spells free. That also requires another resource, being you just having cards in your hand. But that's a card that could potentially reward you for doing nothing that game aside from just ramping. And the entire game up until that point, you get to pull out I'm not doing anything, guys. I don't have anything.
Yeah, you could make a deck whose entire deck is only ramp and card draw and tutors to get to get Omniscience. Not that there's a lot that you can get, but you know, whatever. Ramp and card draw, try to draw it, and that would be enough to win the game, presuming you have like one Laboratory Maniac type effect in the deck. Because once you get Omniscience into play, and if you have enough card draw in your deck, and you have a little bit in your hand, you should just be playing them all and drawing your entire deck, right?
Omniscience, to at least being an enchantment, gives a small point of interaction, assuming you're not playing all the broken counter spells in a blue deck.
They don't even have to be free counter spells.
Somebody could, in response to you playing your first massive free spell, destroy the Omniscience.
Yeah.
But I find it unlikely that you wouldn't be able to protect the Omniscience most of the time.
My favorite way to win with Omniscience, not that we think it's necessarily great to do so, but I love Eternal Witness effect plus either Mystic Confluence or Sublime Epiphany, because you get to either bounce the Eternal Witness and draw cards, or you get to copy the Eternal Witness and get your Mystic Confluence or Sublime Epiphany back. That's just a little bit of fun.
That is pretty cool, but that's the other worst part of the Omniscience is when somebody plays it and they're like, look at
so cool.
Look at all this cool shit you can do when you don't have to spend mana on your spells.
That's the problem, is you have the Spencer being like, look how cute this is. You guys ever have that experience back home where someone like does like a broken combo to win the game? It's like, okay, but it's cute, right? And you're like, yeah, sure.
Okay, good for you. You found a slightly different way to do the same thing. Yeah. So Omniscience, yeah. That's kind of an edge case one, but I still find...
And that's what, 9 mana?
Or 10 mana.
10 mana.
I think it's 8 blue.
Yeah.
Or 7 blue.
7 blue, yeah.
And Bolus' Citadel fills a similar role to Omniscience to me. It's more possible with Bolus' Citadel, like you might hit... Whereas Omniscience requires...
Cards in
your hand. The Bolus' Citadel requires that you have like some way to kind of manipulate your top deck so you don't go land immediately.
Or just get lucky.
Yeah, or just get lucky. It's pretty easy. That's all you need. Always make sure you get your Viscera Seer off the top right away, or your Sensei's top or something.
Yeah, what's the 3-mana guy that makes a goat token?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So there's that too. Other sorceries that do it, we put Primal Surge. That requires a
deck building restriction.
Restriction in your deck building, only playing permanents.
But that is a card that, more so than anything else that we've talked about that's not banned, does just say win the game on it. Like, all these other cards, like, Insurrection or Omniscience, aren't literally win the game. You have to have stuff. Primal Surge is literally win the game.
Yeah, you wouldn't play it unless you knew you could, because like then you would just deck it, like if you didn't immediately win in some way. And there's like so many ways. Like
the Primal Surge deck is just put all of your permanents and all your cards into play, and then you have a either infinite mana kill everyone somehow, or you have like a lab man effect, right?
Yeah, you got lab man, or you could have like
the Jace or
Impact Tremors.
Oh, yeah, that works.
Or Storm Surge type thing.
Yeah, you could have like a Walking Ballista Heliod combo in play or something, right? As long as you can do it like at instant speed. So, and you know what? I think Primal Surge is a really good example of a card that is pretty toxic in the sense. And I've played a Primal Surge deck back in the day, back when Muldrotha the Gravetide came out. God, probably 5 or 6 years ago. It's a long time ago. I built Muldrotha Primal Surge, only permanents deck, and it's actually kind of cringe because you just play like a normal deck, except for the sometimes when you draw the Primal Surge, then you just get to win at 10 mana, and it's not very fun for your opponents, honestly. And even for yourself sometimes.
Yeah, and with those cards, people sort of have to treat you like you have a combo piece in play. We've talked about this on the show before, but you just having the right amount of mana and cards in hand kind of presents like you have the opportunity to pull off your win the game button.
Yeah, like if you have a one card win the game card in your deck, like you were saying, Eli, if you have enough mana to presumably cast it, it's almost as it's kind of equivalent to, from your opponent's perspectives, if you had half of a 2-card combo on board, right? Like if you had like a like a Phyrexian Altar or something, or if you had like a Mikaeus in play or something, right? So yeah, it's not really great for them or you because, well, if they treat you like you have that like all the time, you're probably not going to have fun because they're going to be like targeting you. And if they don't, well, it's just a really big feel bad when all of a sudden you do that.
So let's try to design the sorcery that just says you win the game, like no other requirement, because the way people talk about this, and I think it was somebody on the Commander Clash podcast at one point that said something along the lines of they could have a 8 or 10 cost card that just won you the game. I can't remember who. Seems like something Richard would say. If I'm wrong about this, I apologize, but this is a sentiment that I think is not uncommon. But what would it actually have to cost, and what would be the downside? The closest thing right now to a sorcery that says, like, strictly you win the game, and that's pretty much all it does, is Approach of the Second Sun, which I think nobody would say is a broken card because of the steps associated. Play it once, it talks, 7th from top?
Yep.
And you gain 7 life. That's not...
And then you have to draw it back and play it again, right?
Yeah, you have to draw it and cast it again.
Yeah, and like you said, Eli, I don't think many people would consider that super problematic. Probably would be on the weaker side, honestly. People would be like, oh, you're trying to win with Approach of the Second Sun? That's awesome.
Yeah, for you to win with Approach of the Second Sun on the turn that you play it the first time, you would not only have to have an absurd amount of mana, but you'd have to have some way to draw down to it.
To draw it or tutor it out or something, right?
So at that point, it's like 14 mana plus other pieces. It's effectively just a worse 2-card infinite combo.
Yeah.
Which, another thing that we had listed here, say Enter the Infinite in a deck with Thassa's Oracle. Enter the Infinite is how much mana again?
I believe it is 11 it's 12 mana, I believe.
12 mana?
Yeah, so it's 12 mana, draw your deck, put 1 card from your deck back into top of your library.
Yeah, so if you draw Thassa's Oracle, you can then play it. So that's sort of a 1 card win the game
14
button.
Mana,
14
right?
mana.
Yeah. So, and Yeah, it is 12. It's 8 blue, 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 blue. So that's feels like kind of on the lower end of how much you have to pay to a fair way to win the game, quote unquote.
So
aside from Primal Surge, I guess.
Jimmy's saying, oh, there's a lot of 8 mana cards that just win the game. Well, not necessarily true at all, really. But there is a 14 mana win the game in blue decks, if you like to play those cards.
Yeah. And if you want to think of, like, dealing damage or somehow draining people, with black spells, that's going to cost you a lot more than 14 mana usually. I mean, if depending on how much damage the table has taken, right, it's going to be less. But let's say that people are...
We get Exsanguinate, Torment of Hailfire, Debt to the Deathless. We actually we ran a little test thinking about the strictly damage-dealing sorceries as a way to win the game, comparing this again to Biorhythm, which Biorhythm, in its best use case, kind of reads as a deal
30 damage.
30 to 40 some damage, depending on, maybe somebody has no creatures, then it's just like deal 4, or it's deal whatever, infinite, whatever their life total is. But if assuming they haven't like done a crazy life gain thing in that game, we're assuming it's like dealing 39, whatever, around like that. Because how many creatures, especially if somebody's ramping it out like crazy.
So we'll be conservative and say, we got to get through 40 damage.
Yeah,
with the,
so we wanted to design our spell. So we have Crackle with Power, perhaps the most efficient red card that can, because it deals to 3 separate targets, so your opponents. And we did the math to get to 40 damage with the Crackle of Power. It would be 26 mana, because it'd be X equals 8 plus the red.
Yep, and it's times 5, so it's 8 times 5 to 40.
Or is Crackle 3 red?
I think it's red XXX, right?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right, yeah.
So yeah, it's deal 5 times X to X number of targets, so you get to deal 40 damage to 8 targets. You'll choose your 3 opponents as the targets, right? There's 3 of them, and the other ones are irrelevant. So you need 26 mana to deal 40 damage to all your opponents with that.
The next efficient card most efficient card that strictly deals damage or causes loss of life would be the classic Torment of Hailfire. Yep. If I'm wrong about this in any way, if there are other sorceries that do this, I know Death to the Deathless deals double X, so that's a good one too.
So yeah, with that one to be 40, that would be 24 mana.
And for our Torment of Hailfire, 16 times 3 would be would be 42 damage. But the thing about Torment of Hailfire, it factors in cards in hand and non-land permanents in play that you can use to sacrifice in place of 3 life. So in an average case scenario, we figured it might be reasonable to expect your opponents have combined around at least, and we're doing this as an at least, 5 non-land permanents in play, 5 cards in hand, or like combination like 10 total of whatever resource.
So just using that number.
But they're likely going to have more by the late game if this is a late game thing.
But they might be low on life or something, right? They might have lost, 6 life.
So averaging that also becomes 26.
Yeah.
X being 24. So yeah, kind of an interesting number. I think so. Through those tests, the Crackle with Power test, I think for me, 26 mana win the game. I think that's a pretty fair ask. I think that's not unreasonable.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's spending 26 mana to deal that much damage to everybody, I can't be that mad at that, right?
Yeah, I think I'd say good job. It's, I played a couple weeks ago my Gruul Spellslinger deck.
Yeah.
The Wind was just ramping an incredible amount of mana, using some rituals to generate a stupid amount of mana, and then winning with once you have around like 100 mana or something. Like, that's not unreasonable. That's a series of many cards and many steps. I don't think I have a card in the deck that could just win me like strictly on its own.
Even with a couple cards, it'd probably take more than 2 or 3.
Yeah, if I had the Crackle with Power, I guess I could cut that number down to 26. But
yeah,
for now,
yeah, if you had the Crackle with Power in the deck, you could maybe get like a mana geyser into Crackle with Power. It might work.
Yeah, that might be more achievable. But that's not doesn't scratch the same itch of wasting people's time.
So from the damage perspective, somewhere around 25 mana, right? 26 mana maybe. But there's another group of cards which are a little bit different. And I kind of think of these as the kind kind of creature based one card cards that will kind of combo with multiple cards. It's a little bit weird way to describe that, but what I mean is think of like Tooth and Nail, right? It's 9 mana for the spell plus the entwine cost, and it'll get 2 combo pieces that'll win the game.
If somebody wants to get their Peregrine Drake and Deadeye Navigator, they can
or
get
like Mikaeus and something with Mikaeus or whatever, right?
So Triskelion.
Yeah, Triskelion. So that's even though it's multiple cards involved in the combo, it's all stemming off of one spell, like one card, right? The Tooth and Nail. But you can say, okay, but that maybe that dies to like removal or something potentially, depending on what cards you're getting, right? Maybe some of them are immune to removal, maybe some aren't. But like in a similar sense, like I don't know, what a classic one is like Godo.
Yeah, Godo, the 11 mana win the game.
Yeah,
assuming
no interaction, right? Yeah, Godo, get Helm of the Host or whatever, put it on Godo and take infinite, combats or whatever, or make infinite copies of Godo. Other cards that I think of, like, these are more like deck building constrictions, but like Hermit Druid, that one's a lot cheaper. But theoretically, if you have like 10 cards in your deck that are specifically there to get milled with Hermit Druid, and you're not playing any basic lands, there's a way you could potentially assemble some sort of like Dread Return off of like Narcomoeba and stuff, and maybe put in like combo pieces and win. But anyway, the point is that these are other kind of ways, and outside of Hermit Druid, which is a little bit weird, they're 9 or 11 mana for the Tooth and Nail and Godo. So just some other things. I guess similarly, other cards that like tutor multiple cards maybe could be considered like win con. If there's like a card that like, I know there's like a black tutor that's like tutor X cards to your hand, right? Costs a lot of mana, but if there's cheap 2-card infinite combos, that kind of becomes one card win the game for 10 plus mana.
I guess I just don't understand the mentality of believing that these type of cards are just fine, while also complaining about how broken and powerful ramp is in Commander, because these are all of these things. The thing they have in common is they're just the ultimate payoff to nothing but ramp.
Yeah.
And so should that be rewarded more? Like, I'm not saying it's something that I inherently hate. I don't think I'd actually have that much problem with it if players were willing to admit that it's a broken, powerful thing that they're doing, and they're just okay taking their lumps when they have no creatures on board and all they've done is ramp the entire game.
Yeah.
But they're not. People aren't okay with that. They want to get away with this.
And people, I think a lot of people just kind of take for granted that maybe those kinds of effects really do power up your deck more than you might think it does, right? Like, if you're playing multiple cards or even just one card that will win the game off of you ramping, and that's kind of like your strategy, or at least partially your strategy, you just have to accept that a small percentage or medium percentage of the time, your deck is just going to be playing above the level of your table, probably. And you have to... Yeah. And so, do you really want an inconsistent, very powerful deck? Is that going to make for good game experiences? Or do you think a better game experience would be like a consistent power level deck, like not consistent deck, but like the power, what you're going to do is a smaller band from like weak to strong?
Take maybe my Chumbo Tribal deck. I think it's a very reasonable, fair Jund Creatures deck, but it has Bolus of Citadel. And so I have to tell people before playing the deck, it's a reasonable deck, it's doing mostly fair things, but it's possible if the fates bless me, I might just be able to kill you on turn 6 or 5.
And this isn't even like, I know there's a lot of variability in Commander, right? But this isn't even like talking about like Soul Ring, starts that go crazy with mana. This is just like, you have some cards in your deck potentially that disproportionately win the game out of nowhere, right? Than other cards. So I mean, if everyone is doing that at your table, it might be okay. I would think that a more enjoyable game might be without them, personally. So, and I want to be able to play expensive cards. I want to be able to be trusted with mana more than 7 mana in a game, right? Because if we live in a world where players with 8 mana in a game just going to be winning the game from no board state, I think that leads to a much less fun Commander format. A format where you have to hold up counter spells, where you have to hold up interaction.
I was going to say, that's always the argument in favor of this stuff is, well, why you're just you're whiny commander players. You get good, like just have interaction, just interact more. Outside of counterspells, a lot of these things actually don't have any interaction. You can, in response to the Torment of Hailfire, you can Teferi's Protection out. You could Angel's Grace maybe or something like that. You could, I guess, maybe gain a lot of life in response, or you can counter. Like the best answer is always a counterspell.
Yeah, there's
and most colors do not have good. Like white has a couple of bad counterspells that can maybe save you for a turn, and then like put it on top of the library or put it back to their hand. But that's a temporary fix.
There's not really going to be a counter for a Primal Surge, except for like niche situations where like you have like a Torpor Orb and that like somehow prevents them from winning or something, right? Like it's not gonna. You can't really respond to a Primal Surge and stop it.
I don't like any moves to the commander format that do anything to enforce a sort of large-scale metagame to the format, where, in this case of the increase of win the game cards, I think it would turn into rewarding like green decks that ramp incredibly well, which is already super prevalent in casual commander.
Yeah.
And then the response is play blue decks.
Yeah.
And so it becomes either play the broken ramp deck that has a win the game card, or play the deck with 20 counter spells so that you can not lose to the broken win the game
free
card.
Counter spells too, so you can have them up when necessary, right?
And does that seem like, does any move like that ever seem like something that people would want in Commander? It's actually completely going against the vision of the old rules committee, that sort of thing. And I think that's what they intended for the future of the format, was to avoid that sort of thing. So I would like to encourage people to not seek that out or say, oh, people could just choose not to do it. They won't. I don't think they will. I think some level of guidance from now Wizards of the Coast and Gavin and the Commander format panel would be necessary to prevent things from becoming more homogenous in the Commander format.
Yeah. I think for cards that quote-unquote win the game or make your opponents lose the game, they really should be almost... I think sometimes they can be fine and they can be okay, but I think that the times when they are is when it's kind of prohibitively expensive or the hoops are prohibitive. So something like... Or you need to figure out a combo and then this is how you win the game or something. Or like it's just absurd mana or something. So something I think of is like Door to Nothingness, right?
Oh,
where I'm sure there are ways to combo. If you make infinite mana and you can untap your things, you can kill everyone, right? But that's really just a sink for like your infinite mana, so it's not a problem. And you can one at a time, after playing it, having it enter tap for 5 mana, then you can one at a time kill each opponent for 10.
I was thinking about the Crackle with power. Let's do the Door to Nothing. It's 3 times Door to Nothingness. That's what
35, right? 30. Is it 5 to play?
5 to play and
10 to activate.
10 to activate. So if 3 to Door to Nothingness, that would be 45, right?
No, only 35. 35.
Well, I'm saying, like, say you've also got to like cast the Door to Nothingness.
Oh, sure.
So like, say you're casting it and activating it 3 times. Or like maybe you like cast it and you copy it multiple times.
Oh, and then they
so it ends up like with around like it ends up over like 30 or more mana.
Yeah,
right? to assuming you could ever pull that off, but Door to Nothingness, that's a very fair balance. Like the numbers on that one seem maybe even a little bit high for nowadays, but I don't know if I'd want it any lower.
If they made that in current year Commander, would they just make it kill your opponents? Like, would they make a card like, and it would be like a little bit more restrictive, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
They'd like to make a probably cheaper Door to Nothingness.
Yeah, so
I'll make one person lose. Awesome.
I don't think we really have. Maybe we should finish this off and talk specifically about. I know we've talked about Biorhythm a lot. I do have a couple more things I want to say about Biorhythm, and then maybe we can talk about Coalition Victory, because I don't think we talked about that much. One thing that I don't appreciate about Biorhythm is because the argument for Biorhythm is like you have to jump through other steps, other hoops to actually kill someone. Maybe you're leaving yourself vulnerable, whatever, right? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to just have, a couple creatures in play a Biorhythm, and then just attack someone and kill them, right? Like, let's say they have their commander and maybe another creature to block with. If you just have three creatures in play.
Especially the green mana dork deck. Like, turn your ramp spell that you're using to play the Biorhythm into, like, potentially, like, the next turn, assuming, like, anyone like doesn't kill you or something, then
yeah, and maybe that situation leaves you to be killed or something, but whatever. So, I think Biorhythm can be just played as the most efficient burn spell in like an Aristocrats deck, where you just like play some creatures, maybe some ramp creatures, right? And you have like a Aristocrats kind of draining effect in play. You play Biorhythm to deal 35 damage to your opponents, then you just sacrifice all your creatures, they're all dead, right? There's more that you can do with Biorhythm that just kind of makes it unfun general. And even if you're not winning the game and killing people with Biorhythm, you're I hesitate to say this, but I do think you're kind of ruining the game in some sense. You're taking away agency from your opponents. And if you're not winning with Biorhythm, it's not exactly like this, but it maybe is it akin to like playing like a mass land destruction spell without winning, where you're just like handing the win to someone else.
I've told you this story before, playing on Magic Online against somebody with a deck that seemed to be mostly bulk commons and uncommons, nothing commander significant. I'm pretty sure some vanilla creatures too. And within the game, I had a Saracen, but had completely written this guy off. I don't think I attacked him a single time because I was thinking, well, this is the bulk deck. Like, this isn't gonna win. And then goes and plays a Magister Sphinx on me with his bulk creatures out and swings and kills me. I was at like 60 some life before that, and then I just died. And I thought, well, okay,
yeah, a Magister Sphinx.
He got me.
It sets your life to 10.
So Magister Sphinx, Sorin Markov, the one person's life total becomes 10. I'd like to believe that people consider those to be incredibly strong cards in Commander. I would hope so. Or maybe things have just changed because it doesn't win the game, but...
What, is Sorin Markov 5 mana? 6 mana?
6, and the Sphinx is 7.
Yeah.
But now just the idea that Biorhythm is just the supercharged, like, way better. I mean, it has some risk to the caster, I suppose.
Yes.
Is the like, oh, I could lightning bolt you after you play your Biorhythm. It's like, okay.
Yeah, or even just like in a non-ramp deck. I know you could say like, oh, it's like similar to like an overrun, I guess, but I don't know. It's a little different. Yeah, I think that's about what I have to say about Biorhythm.
Well,
So
it also it potentially punishes the person who's done the least in the game, which I don't think is another very healthy type of card, because there could be a player in the game who has like played no creatures, has hardly ramped, maybe didn't even get a chance to play their expensive commander that's not that good, and then you squeeze off the early Biorhythm, and you're like, oh, sorry, goodbye, buddy.
Yeah, and I mean, like I mean, this is probably, it's a lot of mana, right? So we're getting into like the 12, 13 mana, multiple cards effects. But like, do you think you'd be happy if someone played like what's the Undaunted bounce spell in blue? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Coastal Breach.
Coastal Breach that ends up costing 4 mana. If someone plays like, there's other cards that bounce creatures for 4 mana, whatever. But like in a green blue deck or something, you play like bounce all the creatures, play a one mana creature, play Biorhythm, win the game. I know you lose to removal, I guess, but like, is that really a good thing? Is that like what we want to encourage?
Yeah, and that's a combination of cards where all the cards are good in the day. You're not really giving up much to pull off something like that. Like I play Blasphemous Act, I play my Mana Dork, I play Biorhythm.
Yeah, that's even better, I guess, right? 1 mana.
Like, it's pretty doable, I think, and not asking a lot in your deck build. I think. Let's maybe think of like the green decks we've played. I think we could justifiably play Biorhythm in any of our green decks
with no major changes, really.
Like in my Arcades deck, I think that would just be a win the game. Like, assuming I have like a few creatures in play. Like I've got a flying commander too, so
you just wait to play it until it kills everyone, and you kill everyone, right?
Yeah, pretty scary.
Too scary.
You know what else is too scary? Maybe not too scary, a little scary, because it's not going to come up that often because it's a 5-color card, whereas Biorhythm is going to show up a lot because green is, I believe, if I'm not wrong, the prevalent color in all of Commander. Like most people are playing some green at least.
I think so. People like to put lands into play.
At least that's what Reddit would have me believe. But final thoughts moving into discussing the likely unbanning of Coalition Victory in late April. It's almost certainly going to happen.
Yeah,
I might be wrong about that. I'm not saying buy a bunch of Coalition Victories. I mean, it's what do we say, $2?
$2.50, $2. Yeah.
You're not going to be out much if you buy a couple Coalition Victories. It's possible it gets much more expensive. It's been reprinted like one time, maybe.
Yeah, we haven't gotten any confirmation from that it's going to be unbanned, but as someone who has listened to pretty much all of the, read and listened to all of like the Gavin Verhey like bracket conversation, he's mentioned it multiple times as a card that he really likes, that card in particular, and that very reasonably could be taken off the list and put into the...
On the next announcement, they are not going to ban any cards, but they are potentially unbanning cards and moving them to the Game Changer list, which is, I'm assuming, what is going to happen to all cards that will be unbanned. Maybe there's an exception to that. I don't know if I could think of it, but...
They mentioned that was what they were going to do, but there's no reason why they couldn't not do that. They could move a card from the list to the non-game changers.
It's possible that people, or the commander group or whatever they're called, the advisor, not the advisory group, but they're...
Not the rules committee anymore, the commander...
The commander clan.
Yeah.
And Gavin, they decide that, actually, Coalition Victory... There's going to be a couple people on the group that are like, well, that's not even CEDH viable, so honestly, don't even put it on the Game Changer list. I don't know.
Yeah, but for Coalition Victory, it's, like you said, Eli, it's very restricted in the sense that it's a 5-color card, so it can't go in as many decks. But in the decks it does go in, I think it's honestly more toxic. Well, not more toxic than Biorhythm, because Biorhythm also has the mode of just grief the game, whereas Coalition Victory at least wins the game.
I like that compared to, we were talking about some of the other sorcery speed win the game things. Coalition Victory at least has the option for every color of magic to interact with it being cast and disrupt it by killing the creature, but then it also just becomes another always have removal or lose the game at a certain point in the game.
No one is allowed to have their 5-color commander in play, because at some point they could just untap and play Coalition Victory and the game is over.
But I guess we should be fine, because what did the new Command Zone deck building template say? You got to have like 20 plus removal spells in your deck. So so you should be cinched up for that.
And you shouldn't play you play like 2 6-drops and no cards more than 6 mana.
Yeah, so you should probably...
You can't even play Coalition Victory because it's too much mana.
Shame on you if you're not holding up removal every turn in a Commander game, honestly.
That's actually why they recommend you play so many 2-drops, is so that you can play your 2-drops and still have mana up to stop the 1-mana win... the 1-card win con that's coming down by your opponents. Yeah. All 3 of them, actually.
Honestly, you're kind of asking for it if you don't have your removal ready.
If you don't have 3 counter spells for the table, yeah.
If you don't just intuit that somebody's going to Coalition Victory as soon as they have 8+ mana.
Yeah, this is why you have to play...
Kind of telegraphed.
I mean, honestly, do you think the solution to this is just to ruin any game you ever play by starting to play, telepathy in all of your decks so that you can see when they have the Coalition Victory?
I think the solution is the real weak point of Coalition Victory is they have to control a land of each basic land type, which the easiest way to do that is non-basic land. So... The new meta is run Ruination effects and non-basic land hate in all your commander decks.
Yeah, but the problem is for the ones that... There's some that replace them and then they can just get the basics. But they're not playing any basics, right? You're good. They're playing a greedy mana
I guess
base.
If they're trying to get it off of a tri-land, you could Ghost Quarter and then they should be lacking land type maybe, potentially.
Yeah.
If they're barely at the limit.
You have to hold up your wasteland.
Unlikely.
Your strip mine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm pessimistic for the future world where people will play a Coalition Victory against me. I won't be very happy, but that's okay.
Well, let's think of it this way. Okay, so slightly different type of card. They banned Golos because Golos was just the best 5-color commander. This will be the best 5-color win condition, right?
Yeah, except for all of the other, if you don't want to do 2-card combos that are synergistic or good.
Yeah, because also what I'm wondering is...
Oh, people will just do this instead.
2-card infinites before turn 7 on the bracket system is precluded from bracket 2 and 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if Coalition Victory is put on, but it's a game changer, you can still have that as your game changer in the bracket 3 deck and do it. I mean, you'd be kind of well, we understand that this is not the spirit of the thing, but people will say, well, it's not a 2-card infinite.
Yeah.
So I can do it on turn whatever, like however early.
I mean, presumably, like, not, like, without, like, an insane hand if your deck is just trying to play Coalition Victory, right? If that's your goal. You have multiple tutors that can get it, even inefficient ones. I know tutors are kind of a thing on the list, right? Like, if you're playing too many tutors, like, you know, your deck gets bracketed up. But, I mean, all you need to do is play ramp and tutors, right? That's all you need. And then you play your commander, whichever the cheapest one is that's 5 colors. And I guess I don't know. I guess it'd be 5 mana. Maybe there's another one that's less somehow. But yeah, you just ramp, play your commander. Next turn, play Coalition Victory. Goes pretty hard.
Like, people just aren't satisfied. I mean, isn't it good enough that you get all 5 colors? Well, is that not good enough for you?
I just don't really think that you're playing the game much, right? Like, I don't understand the cards like Coalition Victory, because it's just like, I have one thing that I want to do very, very, like, exactly, and there's, like, not much to it.
You know what I think is more common than the Omega Ramp or the all-in Coalition Victory, win the game, like, button in the 5-color deck? I think it's more likely the common commander scenario of 2 or 3 players, like, actually going at it, like, actually contributing to the game, having a normal, like, fun, maybe even, like, an intense game of commander, and then they just, like, pass the turn to the person who's done nothing the entire game, and they go, oh, never mind, guys, all that, I win the game now.
I drew Coalition Victory.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, Coalition Victory, more than Biorhythm, comes across to me as a card that'd be played by, like, would be played at a lower power level than it would deserve. Does that make sense? Like, this feels like a Timmy card, whatever, right? Or like a Johnny card. I don't know I don't know which one is accurate, but it's like, oh, I'm playing my Weatherlight Tribal, you know, cool deck, and I've got my Coalition Victory as the win con or something.
This feels like a Jimmy card.
Yeah, a Jimmy card, yeah. Or, you know, you're just playing, like, I'm playing my Kenrith Politics deck, and you know, it's my Super Friends deck, and I gotta win the game somehow, so I just, you know, do nothing and play the Politics game, and, you know, eventually just play Coalition Victory. I know it doesn't work with Kenrith because it's not a 5-color commander, but you know what I mean.
I forget who said it, but I think a couple of different commander podcasts have brought up the idea that with any card like this, the people playing it, they will get bored of playing it and just stop playing it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think if that's the best argument for the card being,
it's not good.
Like, okay, that's not good.
There's always new players that are coming in, and then they'll try it and they'll do it.
Yeah, and they won't, like, probably think about it that much and be like, oh, like, that didn't feel that good, because, like, they're not playing that often. Like, we talked about on our brackets episode, the bracket 2, like, casuals that probably only play, like, Commander once a month or something, and they're playing their games, and, like, over the course of a year, maybe, if they have, like, a regular play group,
they do it a couple
times. People are like, hey, I've noticed that Coalition Victory, that kind of sucked, didn't it? But they're realizing that at, like, the end of a year, after, like, so many, like, you know, they're very infrequent and, like, small amount of games.
Do you know, do you remember back in the day, the Command Zone did, like, a podcast episode where they were like, what are the quintessential, like, archetypes that we would recommend, like, new players to build? Like, every new, like, at some point in your journey, your commander journey, like, you gotta build, like, a landfall deck, right? Or you build, like a graveyard deck or something, or like a Spellslinger deck, right? At what point do new players coming in, you know, I gotta build a Coalition Victory deck? Like, that's the cool thing to do. Yeah. I don't know. The card just screams toxic casualness to me.
Yeah, we'll see in about a month what happens. Do you think it's possible, while we're on this discussion of the possible unbannings, do you think Gavin's you think he's playing with the Primeval Titan thing? You think he said that just to spook people?
I think there is a very real chance. I'm gonna go 40% chance that Primeval Titan gets unbanned. That's what I'm going. Maybe you think 30, 40? What do you help me out here?
We were talking to Gigas before this podcast about the Primeval Titan unbanning, and we brought up that well, you guys wanted more green game changers on the list. Monkey's Paw Curls. Gavin's saying, careful what you wish for.
Biorhythm.
You get Biorhythm and you get Primeval Titan.
Yeah, and they'll bring back Sylvan Primordial too, just to spite you.
Yeah.
So,
oh man,
I hope not.
Which would I rather see, Sylvan Primordial or Primeval Titan? I think I'd rather see the Sylvan Primordial personally. Yeah, I wonder.
I do not. Now, while I give the Primeval Titan maybe a 30% chance, 40% chance, whatever, to get unbanned. Not that I want it unbanned, just my realistic understanding, because it feels like it's been a long time coming.
He just specifically mentioned that one as an example of a card that could be moved to the Game Changer list.
Can't say 0% anymore for bans and unbans because they didn't ban Dockside for 4 years, then they banned it, right? So I can't know what they're thinking, but I'd put Prophet of Krufix, another broken green-blue card, but broken green card. I put that at about a 0.1% chance. They can't do that one.
With the Primeval Titan, I'm thinking I have to rack my brain for the allies on the Commander format panel, because there's definitely a few people
who can be swayed.
There's a few people I believe that would try and push to unban the Primeval Titan.
EDH players, they don't care.
Yeah, because they don't have to worry about any of this.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's fine. You could just win on if you're bringing back the Coalition Victory in the Biorhythm. You could just win with that much mana, so just bring it back.
Man, imagine, not that, okay, I was about to be really dismissive, because CEDH players, at least I know Rebel, I don't know about the other people like Lewitt, but not that they don't play casual Commander, but just the idea of
the people
what if they loaded more CEDH players onto the Commander format panel, and they were helping influence decisions in a type of Commander that they just don't engage with, and being like, it'll be fine. They're just they can be fine with this. We're fine with it. It's kind of that the problem of empathy of well, I personally wouldn't mind this, so I've decided that everyone else should like it too.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it dies to removal. It's 6 mana. It should just win you the game.
It does its thing when it can get countered. If you get your Primeval Titan countered, you get owned.
Dude, it's literally worse than Skyshroud Claim if it gets killed. If people are reasonable and responsible and playing their 20+ removal spells, it's worse than that. It's 6 mana.
Except it gets any land. You can get the with the Primeval Titan. just a thought experiment here. If that got unbanned today, that new card, the Madara land that comes into play and it phases something out.
Oh yeah.
If you really needed to protect your Primeval Titan, you wanted to untap with it. You weren't going to blink it out or give it haste or something.
Pretty sick.
Give it phase it out until your next turn when you can attack with it. So pretty sick, right?
It's worse than the Hour of Devastation card that searches out 2
Yeah.
It's 6. That was
5
mana.
mana.
You get that for 5 mana.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Prime time. It's not that good.
Yeah, not that good.
It's a creature.
It's 6/6 with trample.
Yeah.
Can be reanimated with haste.
Yeah, not that good.
Yeah.
It's probably gonna. I just think one of my least favorite things to see in a Commander game is Field of the Dead and or Glacial Chasm, and must be seeing a lot more of that if Primeval Titan is unbanned.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's my final. I'd like to know what everyone else thinks about Coalition Victory unbanning. Coalition Victory, if they were going to unban a card on the ban list, that's the one where if they're oh, we have to do it. We've got to, we banned those major big cards and it caused a big problem, so now we owe the Commander format
one unban.
An unban, because unban is the opposite of ban, so we've got to correct the action by taking what we've decided is the opposite reaction.
If we do not unban Coalition Victory, the Twitter people will find me and kill me.
Gavin, they can't hurt you, okay? They won't find you.
Gavin, your information is not public. You're safe in your bomb shelter. But yeah, so that's the one, like you were saying, Eli. You were saying if they had to do one, maybe that one.
I would hate it less than the others, I think. I'm trying to think. I maybe wouldn't hate Sundering Titan that much. I mean, it's kind of covered by the rules of the bracket system. It's a mass land denial card in a way.
Yeah. So as much as I hate, as much as I'm not, I shouldn't say hate. As much as I'm generally not a big fan of combo cards or stuff like that. Maybe Reoccurring Nightmare could come back. I don't know about that one, though. I don't think it probably leads to a very good game experience. But if you had to choose one, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But I digress on that. Just bring back the Moxes so people can proxy them, in all their decks. Haha.
Exactly.
I'm playing mono white. I have to play them. I have to play the Mox.
I mean, they could unban Mox Pearl. I mean,
specifically Mox
white
Pearl.
really needs it.
It needs the help.
Yeah.
They should print a white Ancestral Recall. That'd be just good. That'd be fine.
It would help a little bit.
It would do a little bit.
Maybe with that, in like 10 years, maybe white would be playable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear what all the listeners think about this. Especially Primeval Titan. If somebody can make, like, if you can cook with, like, the really good pro primetime argument.
Be interested to hear that.
Yeah, I would like to hear that, because I'm not completely opposed to it. I just don't think that sort of thing could fly with this current, like, string up the green player mentality in Commander, where people really want, like, something to be done about that.
Well, Eli, like, my favorite white card, probably, Sun Titan. Primeval Titan is just twice the fun. Double Sun Titan. If, you know, in the world where we're seeing an r/EDH post once a month, or at one point it was once a month, of people saying something along the lines of, should we just play Mass Land Destruction to stop the green decks? Would that be a good idea? It's like, that should tell you something. That, like, if I'm Gavin, that signals something to me, that, like, people are unhappy to the point of coping and delusion on ways to do something about that. Like, they really want to, like, take some age. They're like, what can be done? You know, the classic, we don't need to get into the Mass Land Destruction discussion, but, you know, the classic rebuttal to that of, if green is the best at ramping and putting lands into play, wouldn't they also be the best at rebuilding after a Mass Land Destruction spell, right? That's the thought, right? Unless you're like giving yourself indestructible or something, you know. But just saying. Anyway, I think that's about what we got for you today.
Yeah, hopefully we will have another one before the April announcement, but if not, that will definitely be a good
episode
jumping off point for a new episode. So I've been Elijah Samuelson. This was a good talk, Spencer, and I'm hoping that we can get another. We've got a few in the, like, topics in the back burner. We had like 5 different episode 45s ready at one point, I think.
Yeah.
So I might try and fire off some more of those. I just thought this would be a good topical one going into the Coalition victory unbanning.
Yeah.
To get people thinking about this.
Yep. Thank you. And
thank you guys for listening.
And the title of this episode is read like this: "It should win the game."
Yeah. Give us a follow on. We're still on X.com. We have a Blue Sky now, right?
Technically.
Yeah.
If you can find it.
We give us a subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. Like the video, and please leave comments. All right, we'll see you guys next time.